And what I always do is tell everybody, hey, online having a great big discussion. Hope you can watch or join. Let's see. We got one person waiting. All right, it looks like the three of us are on now. Let's see, Chris.
How are you going to send it yourself?
How am I going to send what?
The link for us to share.
Oh, here, what I'll do is I'll send it. Oh, well, are you on WhatsApp again now, you said?
Yes.
All right.
Well, send it to me on WhatsApp again so I can send it to some other people too. So, Yusef, you know that Google, I don't know if you checked your email, but Google Plus, Google Hangouts is ending April 12th.
Really?
Google is dismantling this due to low usage.
Oh.
You know Google owns YouTube. You will have to use YouTube to do group chats or some other type of software. So you need to check it probably didn't hit in your primary box, it probably hit in your social box, but you need to check your email. It's an email from Google. They just sent it out this morning.
Wow. Well, here's the thing. The good thing about the way the world works right now, as everybody's starting to jump in, there's already a bunch of people waiting to take their place. You know?
Yeah, well, I was just letting you know in case you were planning on using this form from now on.
Yeah, and I definitely am. And what I will also do is there are so many other platforms that I'm sure there's somebody who's already. And here's the thing: I don't necessarily know that they haven't decided.
Well, Google Plus is actually the decision. There's low usage for Google Hangouts, Google Plus. It was a business decision. They bought YouTube, which basically now with Super Chat and the multiple functions that it has, they don't really need a duplication of services. So it's not a matter of are there other services. There's tons of different venues you can use for this type of. But I was just letting you know if you didn't know. But I'll forward you the email anyway after we get done with the chat. It just came from Google headquarters. They just put out a big email about it. You remember Google Plus was originally the rival to Facebook.
Right.
And Facebook kicked that butt. Google fell miserably. And Google made another power move, which is about YouTube out of San Bruno. So YouTube has become pretty much with YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, there's some monster players now. So Google Hangouts, they just decided to hang it out. So I'm sure there's going to be some people that are going to be mad. But
wow. All right. So everybody say hello. Let's start. Well, Dave, you're probably the one person that's constant that everybody might not know. Tell them who you are, how we met, and how things got started.
My name is David Pitts. Me and Yusef met in Las Vegas, and then we hooked up later in Brazil. We've kept in touch over the years. I went to Brazil first and stayed in Bahia for a little while, and then Yusef came and went to Sao Paulo. I'm now back in the States. I have a son who lives here in Texas. I was in Detroit for an extended amount of time. Now I'm back in Dallas, and I'm actually going to be headed to. I decided to start traveling again for an extended amount of time, and so since our last conversation that we had, I informed Yusef I was robbed at gunpoint at a restaurant by 3 or 4 guys in Detroit. And just at a restaurant, having dinner. And like a movie, 3 masked gunmen came in and stuck pistols to our head and all that other nonsense. So it kind of makes you, whenever these things happen, it makes you reevaluate your life. And I'm just happy to be here because that was right after the show. So right after the show, last time I went to dinner, and that might have been my last show. So my last time talking to you all. So I am very happy, and I'm so excited to meet all of you guys. And I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to listen and take some notes, and I'll join in whenever I can.
Who's up next? Who's in next?
I'll jump in, Mandisa. This is Mandisa. David, you and I actually had some chats on Facebook previously, so I'm not sure if you remember that. But Yusef, you and I actually connected as a result of you reading an article that I wrote for CNN back in 2015. It was the Confessions of a Black Atheist article that I wrote.
Right.
And you and I connected. I think you hit me up via our website. And so you interviewed me for your blog, and you and I have been connected ever since. And I know it's been a while since the last time we talked, but things with me have just become increasingly busy, on the organization and activism side, doing a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking, a lot of organizing different events. And so it's nice to have this opportunity to catch up as well as connect with some other people that you're connected with. So I'm looking forward to the discussion this morning / afternoon.
Yeah, we're all in different time zones.
Okay, so I'm done.
I guess that's you, Saladin?
Yeah. Could you see me?
No one can see you. Hold on.
Actually, I like it. That's kind of cool.
Why are you in? You're in shadow, man, you're making a 1995 hip hop video. Turn on the light so we can see your face.
Saladin, I like that look, man. That is cool. I wish I could dim the lights. Hold on. Let me try to get that.
This looks like the start of a music video. Turn on the light so I can actually look at you.
It's 7 a.m. where I'm at. I'm in San Francisco right now.
Okay.
So, even if I went outside, it's still going to be dark right now. You know what I mean?
It's dark at 7 a.m. there?
I can't get the light.
Wow.
Yeah, man. And it's cloudy out. So, could you see me better now? Hold on. Okay. You can see me a little better now?
Folks, can anybody else see him better?
No, man, you good, man. You don't need to. I like that look, man. That's kind of cool.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So me and Yusef, we grew up together in Niagara Falls as children. And the beautiful thing is that we've been able to stay connected as adults, as grown men, and it's not often that you may have a relationship with people as children, and then you go through your life and you have your journey or your path, and you're still able to communicate with people from an adult perspective. So, yes, that's my relationship to Yusef.
Yeah, you know what? You say the word children, I actually forgot that. I'm trying to think. If I'm 40, I'll be 42 this year. Wow, time, man. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think I kept up with you more than a lot of other people is you became the man you wanted to be, and not necessarily the man. How would I say it? You're who you chose to become, not who you should have been. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, can we see the lady with the amazing hair? With the green background, like she planned this with the sun coming out on the side.
Jokes. Hi everyone. This is Roxana. Thank you, Yusef, for inviting me to this talk about whatever we're going to talk, immigration and everything. My name is Roxana Bangura, and I connected with Yusef, I think about 3 years ago. And it was in the immigration groups, the expat groups, the travel groups. And he's basically been like a mentor to me, advising me on this life abroad, living abroad. I'm in Veracruz, Mexico. This is where I live with my daughter, her and I. She's 10. And I've been here for about almost 2 years. And Yusef was really instrumental in helping me make the transition from the States to living here. So that's my connection to Yusef. Yusef, you muted your mic.
Yusef is
You know, I learned as a courtesy on other shows, whenever I'm gonna do something like drink water or make a loud noise, I'll mute it so everybody else doesn't have to listen to me.
Okay.
And then I forgot to turn it back on again.
Okay.
So, no, what I was gonna say is, you're in Mexico, and Mexico has long been a destination for American expats because Spanish is so pervasive in the United States, and it's right there. You can live in Mexico, but if necessary, pop back over to the United States. And what I wanted to know is, after 2 years there, now that you really understand how it works, as an expat in Mexico, how has it been? Have you seen more of an influx, and has Mexico loosened or tightened their restrictions? Because everyone gets news through a filter. Even us here, we're a filter, but you're there on the ground. If you watch the news, you get all kinds of armies invading from Mexico, armed with, you know, dead babies filled with cocaine, and they're coming to force drugs on our children. And I want to know, what is it really like from your end of it?
Well, I live in Veracruz, so I'm kind of like in central Mexico. I'm nowhere near the border. I'm about a day away from the border, and the dynamics between the two are very different. Where I am in Veracruz, we have a lot of immigrants from Central America. People always assume I'm from Cuba or Honduras or Haiti. Those are the individuals that are in my area. As far as the news that you're getting, a lot of it is propaganda on both sides. You know, the American government, the American news machine really vilifies Mexico. And at the same time, Mexican news is also does the same thing with the United States. What we're seeing, if you're talking about an influx of Americans, I would say that I'm seeing more and more people of African descent. I'm seeing more and more Black people migrating or immigrating to Mexico. That's what I've been seeing since these last couple of years, and what I've been seeing online. And it's certainly a conversation that I'm seeing online in different Black expat or immigrant groups online. More and more people are looking south, literally looking to move to the south of the border. Mexico is unique in that it houses the highest amount of Americans and Canadians outside of the United States. So it's long been for United States and Canadian citizens to come and live. There's also a lot of illegal Americans living here and Canadians. There's a lot of people who live here who are out of status, who are not tourists anymore, who don't have their temporary work visa, or who don't have a permanent resident card, which is the equivalent to a green card. And that's a conversation that a lot of people don't know about or talk about, or it's not talked about much in the news.
Well, stop the show. Is it true? Well, somebody's giving me a major echo. Anybody? What I was going to say is being an illegal American in Mexico like being an illegal Canadian in America, as in they look at you, but they don't really care because of what your mother country is?
Well, here's the dynamic of my skin tone, color. Because being white, you get a pass, and I've experienced traveling through Mexico. I've flown internally in Mexico, and I've taken the bus. Whenever I take the bus, if I've taken the bus from the southern part of Mexico heading to the central part of Mexico, we have immigration checkpoints, and if it's me and my daughter on the bus, most times we're the only obviously Black people on the bus. Her and I will get carded by immigration. So someone that looks like me will be stopped and asked for their identification to make sure that I'm here legally, because it's assumed, I'm illegal.
Wow.
It's assumed I'm an Haitian illegal or a Cuban. I'm here illegally, I should say, not that I'm here illegally. So it all depends on skin tone. Those individuals that live here without papers, and I see them in the groups, I see them every day posting in the groups, and these individuals are white Americans that live here illegally, they really get to slide with immigration. They don't really get carded or bothered. And Mexicans are really nice people. They're very sweet people. I've only had really positive experiences living here. And it's not, the dynamics are very different in terms of immigration. We have a new president. He took over a couple of months ago. And I don't know in terms of immigration if things are going to change. Things have changed for immigrants in terms of the healthcare scheme that we have going. There's some changes there, but I don't think Mexico is really cracking down right now on Americans per se. I recently just came back from the States. I was away for a month for the holidays with my daughter, and it was very easy coming back in. I didn't have, it's so easy to come here and to get a visa. It's a very easy process if you are an American citizen or a Canadian citizen. That is what I've experienced. If either you have the money to pay to get the, to get the status, or it's very easy to get a job here for a company or a business to file for you to get your status. At least that's been my situation and many other people that I know.
Wow.
Roxanne, does your when you go through those situations of being checked by immigration or having to show your ID, does your American passport, and I hate to use this word, does your American passport trump the blackness factor? I mean, when you pull that out, do they just back up and say, okay? Do they apologize, or do they just, or doesn't make a difference?
No one apologizes. But no one apologizes, but my English is definitely a buffer. My accent is definitely a buffer. My Americanness, yeah, I would say there's no apology, but there's definitely a level of privilege having that blue book, as opposed to being someone from who's Black from a Spanish speaking country. I definitely have a privileged status, my daughter and myself. But no, there's never been an apology. Literally, my daughter and I were in Veracruz. We were going to take a plane to Guadalajara, which is the second largest city in Mexico. And we were the next people in line to board the plane. We had gone through all the immigration and customs checkpoints, and we were like about to, go to the plane. And an agent came up to me, and he stood so close to me. I was taken aback. I laughed because I was like, oh, why are you standing so close to me? And he said, ma'am, do you speak English? No, do you speak Spanish? And I said, no. And I'm still not catching on. And then I realized his uniform, he's an immigration officer. So he said, where are your papers? So then I looked to my daughter and I said, Amaris, we're being profiled. And she said, Mommy, stop. I'm like, well, you just need to be aware that he's profiling us. Why isn't he asking anyone else for their papers?
Okay,
and he goes,
wait, let me
why are you asking for my papers?
Let me ask a quick question. One, if everybody has earphones, it's best to use them so we don't get feedback. Does anyone else hear feedback? Or is it just me?
I'm not getting feedback.
Okay. The other thing I was going to say is, should there be a global standard for immigration? And that's the big question that we have to really ask. There is a hierarchy, and fortunately, everyone in this room right now came from a place where we get privileges that other people don't. But the issue becomes, do we want to live in a situation where there's simply a global standard and everyone can go anywhere? Because if it did, would we want to live in other countries? Excuse me. I don't know if Saladin or Mendisa, if you've lived abroad yet. I know you've probably visited, but have you lived in other countries? Have you seen how that process works?
No, I haven't lived abroad.
Yeah, I haven't either. I can certainly empathize with what Roxana says, because usually, when you're raised to have an awareness of what darker skinned people go through, it's not a surprise. It really, really isn't. So I'm not surprised at all that she has gone through this. And I think that many darker skinned folks who either live abroad or who may travel and visit may have some of the same experiences. I'm sorry?
Is it any better or worse than, I'll let Roxana answer that. Roxana, is it better or worse, the inconvenience of being inconvenienced and trauma being profiled in Mexico versus being profiled in suburban or urban United States?
Oh, I only returned to the States after 18 months because my daughter needed to see her father, and I needed to connect with family. If I didn't have a child, America probably wouldn't see me. I love my life here, and I'm not scared when I walk down the street. Police officers are very courteous, very solicitous. They go out of their way to greet me, let me cut them in line. Men walk around here with these big guns. They, big guns. And I don't get that pit in my stomach feeling that I get when I get pulled over in the United States, when I'm in a car with my daughter and I get pulled over and I get, I don't get that feeling here when I'm around the police or the military. And these people don't play. They got these big guns. I mean, guns, half my size. And I don't get that pit of stomach feeling. The dynamics are totally different. I mean, I feel safer. I'm in Veracruz, Mexico. Veracruz has a bad reputation because it's known for, the drugs and everything. It's a long story, but we're about a day away from Texas. So it's a drug route. And I walk around here. Me and my daughter were walking around here last night. I feel safer walking around here than in some areas of the Bronx where I'm from, or from DC where I had my daughter.
And I don't know.
I'm good in Mexico. I'm real good.
I don't know.
I'm deep in Mexico. I live in an area where there are no Americans. I don't live amongst Americans. I'm in a local. There's no Americans around me here. I'm one of. There's maybe 10 of us in the whole city. I'm in a little town. I'm not in any big metropolis.
Saladin, and I don't know if you were on earlier. Did you hear about Dave being robbed? Mendisa, did you hear about Dave being robbed? Because that's what I wanted to talk about. Living, because even in Brazil, I get people who ask me all the time, don't I fear for my safety or my life? And I said, a lot less than I do for being in America. Here, at the very, someone might rob me and take my phone, but I've never felt. I may be in a shopping mall and have a random person come in and just open fire. And I have people say to me, Brazil, my Brazilian friends, I say, Brazil is so dangerous, man. Aren't you afraid living here? I said, you don't understand the difference between living in America and any place else in the world where there is violence. Is in America, you could simply be buying groceries. You could be at your place of worship, and a madman comes in and just starts shooting people. It's a level of insanity that they don't quite understand, and it's difficult.
I don't, and I guess Saladin and Mandisa can make, especially Saladin, you're in San Francisco, which is the big major city, and they have all the major city vices. But I don't know if my experience, whenever you get robbed, and I've been robbed 3 times in my life, and unfortunately, they've all been in big urban cities. You know what that means? I've been robbed in Atlanta twice. One time was in college, and one was 10 years later. And I was shot at I was in college. I was at Morehouse, and I was leaving campus, and some guys just came and started. The guys robbed me, took my car, then they asked me to go in the woods. I said, no, I ain't going in the woods, so I ran for it. Of course, shooting upside down, you ain't gonna hit nobody. So anyway.
Well, for the record, in case you're wondering, Dave is not a gangster. Just in case you're wondering, if he's about as gangster as I am. Which, as you can tell,
second time was 10 years later in Atlanta. I was visiting a friend, and somebody, they carjacked us. And then the third time was in Detroit, which was last week. What has depressed me is and I know that all young black males in their 20s, and and it all ends up the same. The first set of robbers were caught. They ended up in jail. The second set of robbers got into a shootout with police and got killed. And the third time, the Detroit police called me asking me, could I ID these guys, because 2 robbers were shot dead trying to rob a business down the street from where we were robbed. And they believe it's the same 2 guys. All young, and the one guy was probably 16, the other guy was probably 30. And the 30-year-old was kind of mentoring him. It was surreal because as he was taking my wallet, I said, hey, man, can I get my driver's license? Because you know how hard it is at the DMV. And he said, okay. And it was kind of like, and I had no fear because I have been through this before. And I said, this is just weird. And he gave my IDs. And then he said, okay, everybody get their IDs, but hurry up before we start capping. And I was like, okay, well, let me get my credit cards and my health insurance card and everything else. I'm thinking this is a joke. But what depressed me, and I know this is everybody's reaction, the feeling of depression I have is that is my experience of these events, and maybe Saladin Medisa can jump in, and Roxana, because Roxana grew up in DC, so she know what it's like.
The Bronx, not DC.
The Bronx. Okay. Well, yes.
Yeah, I grew up in Queens. There's a lot of New Yorkers there.
Hey, home girl.
Yeah.
And Detroit is home, and I'm in Texas now, and near Dallas. Same thing.
It's funny because I'm in Atlanta.
Atlanta. It's my experience of this traumatic, of this fear. Like I feel more comfortable in Brazil. I felt more comfortable in England. I felt more comfortable when I was in Ghana. Is it because I'm a black male in the United States and I'm a double target? I'm a target by white foolishness, and I'm also a target by inner city fratricide. And I'm thinking that maybe, I have a skewed view of reality, because when I go to Brazil or Argentina or West Africa, I feel at peace, because I know that if something happens to me, it's truly random. And if something happens to me in the United States, it's most likely you probably will get robbed or shot. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Wow. Well,
and I know it's not an objective opinion, but that's how I feel. So I feel that I can never have an objective opinion about safety and security anywhere in the world, because my safety and security worldview has been so skewered by violence. Because I am a 6 foot, 200-pound black male. Regardless of where I go in this country, I'm a target either way.
That's heavy. That's heavy. And again, it goes to that feeling. And I think it was Baldwin that said, I had to leave the United States just to be treated like a normal man, just to be treated just as an average man. I don't know if you've seen the movie I Am Not Your Negro. Has everyone seen it?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, everyone must see I Am Not Your Negro. It is an amazing movie. But the movie starts out with him, going through that internal discussion that Roxana has already resolved about, do I go back to the United States when my life abroad means all I have to do is be a good citizen and go to work every day? Whereas in the United States, I have to be a good citizen, go to work, not be in the wrong neighborhood, not be in a neighborhood that's too nice because I'm a target there too, not go into the wrong place. And this is the part, that fratricide that Dave talks about. Because Saladin, I want to be clear. You're one of those men. And we had this conversation a long time ago. I always wondered why you're still there. Because you have enough talent, self-assurance, you know so much about who you are that you could succeed anywhere in the world. And I always joke that Niagara Falls, New York, where you and I were born, is a nice place to be from, but you're probably one of the very few people that chose success in life and chose to walk their own path that stayed there. Have you considered for yourself or for your future living abroad?
I think the question is, what do you define as success?
I think you get up every day and do things that make you happy, if I'm right.
Yeah, I love exactly what I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I teach preschool. I have an after-school program. I have a Boys as Allies Rites of Passage program for 13 to 15-year-old boys. And that's just 3 primary things that I do. And all of those things revolve around youth advocacy. So I learned along my journey that is one of my gifts, to work with the youth. And at one point, I felt and thought that I was the architect of my destiny. But then I realized that my destiny was actually I am the manifestation of that, So, and I say that to say, it doesn't matter where I'm at. I'm still going to be doing exactly what I'm doing. I just, about a year ago, I purchased an estate, a property in the city that I live in, and I'm renovating it into a private institution right now. So at least for the next 5 years, I'm committed to being in that location, because I wanted to create that as like a communal school where it's going to be sustainable enough so that once I'm able to have that as a foundation, I'm able to go other different places. So I have a 5-year plan in regards to that. So I'm definitely considering going other places, but having the freedom to go other places, not just necessarily like I have to move somewhere, but really the cultural freedom to continue doing what I'm doing. And so my main objective right now is to finish the renovation of my school and to make that available for the youth in my city, as well as youth that come and visit the city.
Wow, that's noble. That sounds. There was another black man that was going to build a school that got some money. Nice. I can't seem to remember his name. Yeah,
Saladin. We need Saladin.
Nice.
Saladin is like, you know, he's precious. You don't see many black male teachers. I never had one. We need people like Saladin where he's at. God bless you, Saladin. God bless you.
Yo, I'm a black unicorn.
No, well, he wanted to build a school where he claimed.
Are we all here unicorns?
Well, Saladin is. I mean, he's working with the youth. He's working with our future. You know, that's a whole other subject. God bless you. Yeah.
Man,
we need 10,000 Saladins. We need 10,000 Saladins.
The only person that I would give the double or triple unicorn status to would be Mandisa, because she's like every unicorn and heathen on top of it. Just a godless heathen, just like me. But you know what? Open up a little bit more about how you and I, like what you do, Mandisa, and I wonder if you could do that globally. Like, you know, there used to be 4 horsemen, right?
Well, yeah.
Who were the 4 horsemen? Tell them who the 4 horsemen were.
The 4 horsemen were considered, you know, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett. Now, these were considered the top primary men of atheism. Of course, they're all white men. But, you know, now, yes, globally, there are a lot of atheist and secular groups out there. In Africa, there are a lot that are coming up. In the Caribbean, there are a lot in Europe. There are a lot of fellowships now. And so what I took the step, I took the leap and quit my full-time job last year. Because, you know, at the time we met, I quit my full-time job and decided to focus solely on secular activism. Now, this could include working with, you know, young people. And this is something that, you know, as my position as a heathen, as an atheist, that we go by an evidence-based premise, that we look at what the problems are, what the solutions can be, and how we can implement them. And regardless of what we believe or not, my non-belief shouldn't be a barrier to working within my community, regardless of whether it's across the United States or whether it's global. and also, you know, this idea of being an atheist or someone who doesn't believe in God is not inherent to just white people. You know, the one thing that now is that our community is growing. There are a lot more people now that are questioning those traditional religious beliefs. And so now there's a space for them to, and also when it comes to younger people, you know, when we're talking about millennials and also the generation that comes after them, those who are questioning those traditional beliefs, and they're seeing something wrong with them. And also, we just have to put that out there. we do. Yeah. But I would say, even going back to the point that was made about even, you know, whether we're abroad or live in the United States, I think there is an awareness. I am from 40 Projects in Jamaica, Queens. And if you're familiar with that area, you know, it is very, you know, it at one time was very, very dangerous. It wasn't one of the nice parts of Queens. And so when you grow up,
the name scared me.
So it's like when you grow, especially New Yorkers tend to have a certain awareness around us that, you know, we have to be prepared for anything, which is kind of good. You know, I had to learn to relax a defense mechanism, because I had to realize that, yes, outside of New York, you don't always have to be on your defense. It's always good to be aware, but you don't always have to be defensive about your surroundings. And also, I think there are a lot of people who, like Roxana said when she talked about propaganda on both sides. The United States, and I think many countries, but the United States is notorious for making themselves seem like they're the best country in the world. And that probably isn't true. I visited Ghana as a teenager, and that's interesting because when you go to different places, when you're just visiting, people will know you're American. They know you're not from there by the way you dress, by the way you talk. They know that you may not necessarily know the customs, but it's good for people, especially if you're a frequent traveler, to get to know the area where you're visiting, because then that way it will help with that communication gap with wherever you're going, and get to know the local people. Get to know the local people, get to know who they are and talk to them. I think so many people don't talk. I'm glad that, David, your situation wasn't as dire as it could have been because you talked to the young man. There's a lot that I think that we can start, gaining some ground if we learn how to just talk to people. And, sometimes that's easier said than done, but when we're talking about engaging different communities, engaging different age demographics, and also engaging different ethnicities and people from different racial backgrounds, that communication does make a huge difference. And it's just something that I think the more we open our minds to these new experiences, the better we become.
Agree.
Yo, so I was listening, and I wanted to add on to one of your points where you were just emphasizing about belief. And it makes me think that we don't have the luxury of believing when it comes to especially working with our children, because they're the ambassadors of our future.
Correct.
We have to have, like you said, evidence-based things that demonstrate what are going to be the actual results of the policies, the procedures, the initiatives that we're putting forth,
Hold on, somebody's having bad reception. I hear you trying to talk.
Medusa.
And yeah.
Okay, hold on, Mandisa. You had bad reception there for a minute.
Talking at this time. So, can you still hear me?
Okay. Well, what we said earlier, though, about having it as a luxury. Belief really is a luxury for people who have safety nets. When you don't have a safety net that catches you, if you make one or two bad decisions, you have to be ruthless and relentless with making sure every decision is the right one. And I think that also ties into what you talked about, situational awareness, Mandisa. When you grow up in a situation where you understand if there's even one mistake, that it's over, that you make a mistake that you can't come back from. And that's something that we talk about a lot, especially in groups where they're people of color, underrepresented groups. We understand the system is not designed for us to be caught if something happened.
Well, I find that interesting. And can you hear me, Yusef?
Now I can hear you much better for some reason.
Okay, good. But that's interesting because, if we are, people of color, especially in the Black community, we have the highest level of belief. So that's an irony in that. There's an irony, and there's an irony also, and that doesn't mean that everyone are blind believers, but there is a higher. So there is no luxury in being Black, but yet we're the highest number of believers. So go figure with that. And these are, again, the types of conversations that we must be having.
Which really speaks to our lack of awareness for the situation that we're really in. You know what I mean?
Well, to piggyback off of the what Mandisa and Saladin are saying, what I'm noticing in different spaces in the Black diaspora is more and more free thinkers, and however you define that, atheists, as well as individuals who are, rejecting this Judeo-Christian, and also, to a certain extent, is, organized religion, Western, whatever religion. Yeah. And I'm seeing more and more people turning to African traditional religions, which is very refreshing to me, because it's just, trying to get back to what was the root, the original, as people were, whatever. So I think that there's a bit of a shift, and people are they're coming out of the closet with these traditional beliefs. So I think we're realizing how detrimental organized religion or white organized religion is to people of color. That's all I have to say. Yusef, your mic is off.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need a mic check, bro.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? I'm so concerned with trying to be a good host, and I also understand that I have my fan on, and I try not to let that, go into the conversation. But I was going to say it's the organization that we lack, and I think that traveling abroad, when you see other groups and other organizations, you see a level of organization that they that they are able to have even without the religious aspect, just to get things done. It's like in the United States of America, the single most successful groups of blacks are always blacks from other countries, be it Jamaica or Haiti and how do we get around that, And again, it still goes back to the other question, should we have a global immigration standard? Because one of the things I learned, immigrants, just like I'm in Brazil, and my Brazilian friends look at me and they say, "What, man, you work too hard. Why do you always have to do this, and that? And how come you won't go out to this place with us where, it's fun, but it's in the downtown at night?" When you're an immigrant, you work so much harder than anybody else in that area. Right. And it seems like, especially when you come from a place where either A, the United States, where you have to work hard and you get almost nothing, or B, you're a dirt farmer from the middle of nowhere and you work hard every day and get nothing. So they come to America and realize, wait a minute, I can still work 15 hours a day the way I did back home, but here I actually get something. It changes the game. Changes everything. And that's why in university you see such high numbers of the children and first and second generation immigrants taking over. I had a professor that told me if it wasn't for certain federal laws, none of his advanced classes would have more than 1 or 2 Americans. Because when you get a kid who comes from the middle of the Sudan who learned advanced calculus on a chalkboard, or you get Habib who comes from the middle of Pakistan whose parents, after school taught, and then you realize these kids are also operating in a second language, which doesn't hit you until later. They're in university succeeding in a language not even their own language.
And they're also the best and the brightest. A lot of those are the best and the brightest in most countries.
And they also have a cultural point of view that they can reference that is other than a Western perspective that they've been indoctrinated into. So they come to the country and they have this sense of cultural capital that descendants of people who were enslaved never had. You know what I mean?
Cultural capital.
Can you go into cultural capital? I'm going to cop that definition.
Yeah.
Yeah. They understand the value and the ability to monetize their principles and their values, because they are a part of their own. They have a sense of identity. I don't
know if you guys ever heard of Yvette Carnell, but she coined a term called DOS.
Oh, Lord.
Slaves.
Hold on. Does someone have a stapler that's attacking them?
No, there's construction outside at the house.
Oh, and that's a nail gun?
Microphone. Yes.
So okay, because I thought you were being attacked by a stapler.
No. I think my expression would have been a lot different.
So somebody has heard of Yvette Carnell, obviously.
I have.
Yeah, I've heard of her too.
On her.
She's a YouTuber, and she has coined the term "descendants of slaves," which has been picked up by another YouTuber called Tariq Nasheed. He's picked up on it, and in the Twitter and the blogosphere, this term DOS has caused a lot of controversy. It has kind of picked up. I ran into somebody else who was using DOS.
Yeah,
I prefer DOE. I say DOE.
Exactly, DOE.
And
enslaved. It speaks
exactly.
to
Exactly.
It's interesting because it's interesting because the what you said, Saladin, I've pondered upon, and you're right. If we were talking about Nigerians who I spend, those are the people who are not from the United States, who are black, who I spend the most time with. And mind you, no matter how friendly I am, I can never be a part of their group ever. I'll never be. I'm a friend, I'm an ally, but I will never be accepted as one of them ever. I've already know that. They're Nigerian, they're Yoruba, and I'm outside the box. But anyway, the work ethic, the effort, the educational attainment is tremendous. Like, I am stunned at the entrepreneurial, the work ethic, the academic, the achievement. It's just endless. So and these people that look just like me, not look like me, but they're the same complexion I am. So it's not just the complexion. It's just that they get a different level of respect from whites than DOSs, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that Saladin has a point. It ties into that legacy of slavery. That and mental health and social psychologists, social anthropologists, and mental health experts are now realizing that there is a trauma. There even have been some studies saying they can prove it through DNA.
Yes.
That there is a trauma
absolutely
that African Americans have inherited, Black Americans that have inherited, that has to be addressed, that has like serious PTSD.
Yes.
And that somehow that is all, and now they're going to prove that it's inherited.
I think we need to say at this point that, because there's this narrative that, immigrants, Black immigrants, have taken some magic pill and they're successful. And we need to remember that, we know the history and, the Jim Crow, the slavery, and all the things that have happened to Black people in this country. But we also have to remember our Black towns that we've had. We've been despite all of what you've gone through, there were successful Black towns that we had here, and we were thriving. And it keeps on happening, right? We have the Oklahoma, we have the Black towns in Florida, and all these other places, California, all these other places where there are Black areas. I think I've read about places in Brooklyn, but each time we're thwarted, and now we're seeing it modern day. What's happened to Brooklyn is gone. The Bronx is on its way out. We know what happened in San Francisco, Oakland. I'm sorry.
You mean gentrification when you say all these cities are gone? Well, we cannot conflate the bombing of Black cities and the extermination of Black lives with gentrification. That's a very different issue because
I don't agree. I don't agree.
Well, wait a minute. Let me do it. Let's do it this way. Saladin, you're old enough to have visited New York City back when it was the New York City that everybody romanticizes, correct? Back when your older relatives would tell you, no, you can't go downstairs. Those aren't regular children playing basketball. They're name any one of the gang affiliates. And you look at it now, I would much rather, and I know people get mad when I say it, I would much rather be able to see a bunch of people walking down the street with a poodle and a latte than go back to when you couldn't take you and your mom couldn't walk downtown with you.
They're
you couldn't walk downtown.
The police. It's all the same symptom. It's all the same thing to different degrees. They're weaponizing the police. You have Spike Lee's relative, I don't know, I think he was playing the guitar or a horn or something in Brooklyn. People are calling the police on the ice cream truck. It's all the same problem. It's us living in our Black and brown spaces and being victimized, whether it's by calling the police or people complaining to the landlord because you're having a party too late. It's all the same problem. I'm not saying
Detroit is better because of gentrification.
I'm
sorry.
Wow, that was a pretty definitive statement, Brother David.
I have an investment property there. And when I say gentrification, I'm not only talking about whites. I'm talking about Black gentrification. Trying to get black people who all left Detroit and went to the suburbs and packed their bags. We are trying to get the black doctors, the black lawyers, the black engineers, the black scientists to come back and gentrify the city. And not it just be a white phenomenon. I bought a house. I mean, there are houses for sale for $13,000, $14,000. You can renovate for 10 grand and you can flip for 80 or 90. We are trying to get African Americans to come back and do that.
Right.
We're trying to get black businesses to come and open up.
When you saw my house in Vegas, what kind of neighborhood did I live in as a quote unquote middle class black American? Where did I live? Did I live in a gentrified neighborhood? As a matter of fact, I did, because I would much rather have a plain ass neighborhood where I can walk down the street than the character of a place where you might get robbed or step on an old hypodermic needle.
Well, we also, I'm sorry, David, but you also brought up the point previously that you could also get got in a nice neighborhood. So there's a lot of misconceptions and perceptions about what it means to be black and we're talking about institutional issues here, starting with being enslaved, with our ancestors being enslaved in this country. There's also a misconception that Roxana was discussing earlier, that there was never any black progress, which we know isn't true. There are black folks who travel, there are black folks who do some of everything. None of us really are unicorns when we think about it. And so there is definitely this perception that needs to change when it comes to how we view our community. But this is a good conversation because it's perceived that all blacks should be against gentrification in a way. But this is bringing about a very interesting debate and discussion about what it means to improve our communities and make lives better without it pricing out the people who live there. Are we going to say that, well, if this neighborhood becomes nicer, should it become unaffordable for those people? And also we can tie this into immigration, because what is the perception of immigration? That there are drug mules that are coming into this country to try to take over everything, when most people who are trying to come here are trying to make a better life for themselves. So there's a lot to dissect there.
Mandisa, you're familiar with Atlanta, right?
Yes, I'm been here now for 21 years.
Okay, so I went to school there. They lived there, so and you correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was in Atlanta, there was a war. When I say a war, there was a war economic. There was a political war between the haves, blacks, and the have-nots. I remember
it probably still is. I think there still is that class war.
One of the blacks, I don't know which black it was, passed an ordinance saying that if you hang your pants down below your butt, you can go get arrested. Now, the ACLU sued and got that thrown out as unconstitutional freedom of speech. But the point is that you had black Americans in Atlanta, when they wanted to open up a housing project in their neighborhood, they did the same thing that suburban whites did. They fussed. Oh, no, not in my neighborhood. Get that out of here. We don't want them kids going to our schools. There's always been this tug of war within the African American community, and Saladin is kind of like you yourself. You're kind of like working in the bridge. There's always been the tug of war between the Howard. Now I'm not, and I come from that, between the HBCU crowd and everybody else, and the guy who's a plumber, and then the guy who's on the street. And the bad part about it is that everyone in our families, no matter how quote unquote successful we are, we got Pookie and Ray Ray in the family. So there's this. When we talk about gentrification, we talk about if we use Atlanta for example, you look at Little 5 Points, look at Midtown, you look over there by Georgia Tech area, which used to be the hood, now it's pristine and nice. Morehouse College after the Olympics, all kind of new apartments went up. West 830 Westview Drive was the hood. Got shot at in college. So we get upset, we see white faces in our spaces. I understand the reasoning behind that, because we feel that we're going to be pushed out. And to Roxana's point, what usually happens is that usually happens. But what is it going to take to get talented, to get the black doctor who's living in Lawrenceville and beyond Stone Mountain and Alpharetta? What's it going to take for him to actually open and move his business into the city? Because if you grow up, I grew up in Detroit where I did see black doctors, black lawyers, black physicians, black farmers, in addition to white ones. But I saw a healthy dose of black criminal and healthy dose of Black success, and it gave me a more balanced view of my life that I could do something more than that. But if the neighborhood becomes devoid of all that, and all you see is just death and destruction and negativity, like Buffalo was back in the day and probably still is, then we can't say anything about gentrification. All we can do is try to participate, because if we can't get us to move back and participate in economic gentrification, then how can we get upset about anybody else coming in and fixing the roads and turning the lights on? In addition to raising the prices to kick your butt out because you're a renter, and that's the same. At the same time, the street lights are actually working again. Trash is being picked up again. Starbucks are opening up. Do you know when they opened up on 79th and Stony, when they opened up the first Starbucks on the south side of Chicago, and 79th and Stony, which is right next to the Nation of Islam headquarters, believe it or not. Do you know that became the #1 grossing Starbucks in America in an all-Black neighborhood? Because we were so starving to have some of the conveniences that we were missing, that if we had opened up, and it was a Magic Johnson Starbucks, I give him credit because he's a participant in the business. But that just proves to you that there's money to be made in the community. But in addition to the Starbucks, we have to be able to get the business owner that owns the Starbucks to actually live in the neighborhood. And it's a battle, because we don't want to be inconvenienced. You still want to be able to shop at the nice stores and stuff. And that's a battle. There's a war going on within the Black community right now. We're fighting. There's a civil war going on right now between different groups. Mandisa, you being a social activist of secular activism, I know what kind of pressure you're facing, because we are notoriously religious. And if you are not notoriously religious in the Black community, you are an outcast.
It's a fight sometimes.
You're in a civil war for the mindset of people to just to be able to participate and be respected as an individual. You have to go to war with the whole community. And that's where we're at right now.
But Dave, are we not able to realize that the class war, yes, we're talking about Black issues, but when you talk about the haves and the have-nots, I've lived around the world and back again. That is not an issue that is specific to Black people. That have and have-not issue have been raging throughout time, because it's a have and have-not issue, but it's also an educated and uneducated. And I know I'm opening up a whole can of worms here, but that whole concept of the who has and who hasn't, like in Brazil, I've had to straighten out a bunch of people. I mean, I've had to have some very uncomfortable conversation with clients and friends when they go, yeah, but you're white. And I'm like, well, why is that? Well, you're educated, you can save a percentage of your income. And in their mind, that's a compliment. I have clients that talk to me as if I was white, saying things about Black people. And I look at them, I'm looking at my skin, I'm like, do you look at who you're talking to? But that whole wanting to live in a nice place, but understanding the have and the have-not issue, I don't know. We're digging a little deep into the crate, but what Dave said is right. When you have the people who are, I'm only going to speak for myself here. When I was in the United States and I had my business running and I was profitable and I do all these other things, I wasn't living anywhere. Like, I think there was another Black family across the road from me, but that was it, because we weren't living in those neighborhoods on purpose. Because nobody wants to be that sacrificial lamb that says, well, I'm going to do it and go back, when I'm not just fighting the outside forces, when you got to fight the inside forces. I mean, how many famous rappers go back to their old neighborhoods and get killed? Because, go ahead.
I really want to hear from Mandisa, because she is in Wakanda, ground zero right now. Atlanta is Wakanda, and I want to hear what Princess T'Challa has to say about what's going on.
Lord, sorry, that is so.
Because you are in Wakanda, you know that Atlanta is still Wakanda.
And it's interesting because we're still we moved to a still very new subdivision. We were the first family here. And there are quite a few Black folks here, some who are from New York, from up north, where you find that in the South, you can get more for your money and more value for your dollar here in the South. And I guess that's one of the reasons why we've been here for over 20 years. So, but I think that, again, I can agree that, there is a class issue that is pervasive amongst different communities. It isn't necessarily inherent to, to Black folks. You know, it's certainly, but I think that, you know, there are so many people who think that moving to Atlanta solves everything, that there is, you know, that is just, it is a mecca, you know, but just like DC is considered chocolate city, right? You know, there's a lot of Black folks in DC who are very successful. And I think that there's also a class issue there as well. But I would say that, yes, it is good to be in a place where you see a lot of Black success, that you can, you know, because we walk in our neighborhoods. I don't have that overall New York mentality anymore, where you do when you do see a certain amount of success around you, and you see more people look like you, it does change your perspective, which it should. But I do think also that we should still be aware of what's going on around us.
Right.
So I think that even if,
sure.
like, let's say, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's say, for example, like, let's say David was saying that the person who, or the doctor who, you know, may open up a practice in a certain neighborhood, you know, and they should, would it be nice, would it be good if they lived in that city? Sure, but I think as long as you are still connected to the community, that you are not acting like you just work there and that's it, it does make a huge difference. And that goes also back to what I said about knowing how to engage and talk to people. You know, it shouldn't just be about a business or your job. But
dear Sister Mandisa, when you say connected to that community, what are we talking about? Are we saying, oh, I'm going to live in this better neighborhood because of my income level and success, but I'm going to send my children to the schools in that neighborhood? No. You can say, how am I going to be connected to this community when you and your friends decide, you know, Friday night we're going to go out for dinner? Are you really that interested to go out for dinner and a show back in that neighborhood? Or are you going to go to some place where you don't worry about your hubcaps being missing when you come out, where you don't have to worry about that walk from the front door to your car with the other women, you know, with their keys in their knuckles saying we all got to look out for each other? It's very difficult to maintain, you know, two different spheres.
Wakanda's not like that.
You're so funny. But that
got
does
Black
bring
neighborhoods in Atlanta that have they might not have all the conveniences, but you walk outside, you couldn't tell the difference between that suburb and a white suburb.
But, you know, that's also interesting, because that brings me to one of the videos you sent, Yusef, about the group of Detroit men who were taking back their neighborhoods. You know, they were tired of the violence that was taking place. So therefore, they were forming this coalition. And, you know, and also, you know, our communities, unfortunately, that when I thought about that, I thought about this no snitching rule that is still pervasive within the Black community. That you don't, snitch. You don't. I mean, that is something that we have to discuss at times, that, you know, we want better, you know, people who are living in what is considered working class neighborhoods or the projects, and which is what I came from. You know, not everyone there wants to be struggling. People want to do better. You know, we certainly don't want to assume that also for other lower income neighborhoods around the world.
But let's go back to what you said, though, about that group of people, and I'm going to link in the video, I'm going to link to it, about the 300, I think they were called 300 Black men, Detroit 300. We are talking about,
and they're a vigilante group.
Vigilante mercenary. I want to be clear. We're talking about a situation where, people have so little faith in their own government because, hey, what's been happening? That we have groups of men, some of with black masks and baklavas, saying, we need to go out here and start shooting drug dealers. We need to go out here and start shooting criminals. What does that do? We're already talking about gun violence. Dave has been robbed multiple times.
And they have.
Wow, this is a we have gone all the immigration.
I mean, to fill you guys in, and then I've got an appointment to fill you guys in when Yusef shows the video. Roxana and Saladin, there's a group of Black men in Detroit called Detroit 300. They named themselves after the movie 300. They have 1,500 Black men. They are armed because Michigan has open carry. Michigan has these open carry, all these complete open firearms laws. They are armed, and they have gone after drug dealers, rapists, robbers. What happens? A 97-year-old grandmother was raped, brutally raped and murdered. This group formed. They went door to door with bullhorns and guns and said, you guys need to tell who they were. They caught the guy, and then they continued and grown. Now, they've been sued believe it or not, by a white liberal legal organization. They've been in some lawsuits, and they are basically a vigilante group. And they go and literally, hunt down. They've been in shootouts. They say, well, okay, this is the dope house, and they'll put flyers saying, y'all got 24 hours to get out of town by sundown. Wow. They'll alert the police, and if the police don't do something, Detroit 300 is busting up in your house.
Now, how does that work? How do you decide? Because we don't have the greatest justice system in the world. But how do we devolve into a situation where, to be clear, our legal system is skewed,
United States and it is of America.
But do we now devolve?
Mexican vigilante groups are right now. Roxana knows there's Mexican vigilante. There's farmers who picked up the guns against the drug lords, saying, "You're not going to kill our babies." It goes on in Mexico.
We have whole cities here that self-govern themselves here in Mexico.
But in the United States, where the media
hides a problem with it. I don't really see a problem
either. In the United States, where the media hides it, there are black men. There were in Detroit. There are men who said, "We're tired of our 5-year-olds getting raped and shot. We're tired of these criminals running wild. And so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna hunt them down and shoot them." Yusef, you gotta play the clip.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, I do all the link in the comments.
Yeah, I do think that
you got to see the clip.
See, I think that what is important here is people knowing what the laws are, how the legal system works, and using it to their advantage. Does that mean that you go out and just shoot, every person in sight? No, because you run the risk of shooting the wrong person. But being aware of what the laws and the legal system is should not be just the sole responsibility or even the privilege of law enforcement. That I do think that every citizen should have the right to arm themselves. However, I do think that there should be some restrictions in place. But most of the people, like David was saying earlier, or like I was saying earlier about these shootings, look at who's committing most of the mass shootings. It isn't us. So
but here's the only problem with a group like 300. I firmly believe, not regardless of, but especially in the case of the most egregious issues, everyone deserves a public trial. When we get away from that, it's a slippery slope to deciding who the bad guy is, and lynch mobs are a real thing. Torches and pitchforks are a real thing. Hey, she's a witch. That's and you know who are going to be the fastest victims? It's going to be black people. Once we start to accept,
I don't know, Yusef, the law, when a city goes bankrupt and they lose basic functions like trash, water, and light, police response times are 57 minutes. Emergency response times are 45 minutes. That's how people are going to react. People are either going to run, they're going to fight, or they're going to fly. I think
I forgot to say, everybody on Facebook, I tagged you in the post, share the post, so that other people can get in on the conversation.
But yeah, they're gonna fight or flight. And this is what happens when society's basic functions are not. And Mendisa's right. We are as tax-paying citizens, we deserve the right of adequate police, state, and federal protection. And so really the shame is not on the reaction of the citizens who are simply trying to protect their homes and however many mistakes they make. But the onus is on the responsible government, the government is not supposed to let a place run so wild that drug dealers can openly flaunt that, yeah, we selling drugs, what y'all gonna do about it? It should be helicopters the next day. But it would, if it was a suburb, it would be helicopters the next day. And so I think that it's an emotionally torn issue of communities. And this is not the only communities doing this. All over the country, I've been looking on social media and I see these small groups of vigilantes popping up saying, hey, we're going to protect our neighborhoods. You're going to come from your shopping during Black Friday, quote unquote, during your Christmas season. And we're going to have guys with guns escort you to the car. And it just, And we want to talk about places overseas. As Roxana says, the American media machine hides all this nonsense that goes on here. They hide it. It's going. It's happening. Trust me. It's going on everywhere. It's going on in Atlanta. It's going on in New York, Chicago, Detroit. Citizens are saying, hey, we've had enough. And what happens is that it gets out of control, and you're right, innocent people are going to die. That's what happens when you lose control. You get collateral damage.
You get collateral damage.
Hey, I got to dip out, you guys. I will join you guys in the next conversation, but I hope you keep it up and keep going on. I'll definitely catch up with you guys. I got to go.
All right, brother David.
Take care, David.
Have a great day.
Wakanda.
All right, take care.
Oh, Dave, go on Facebook and share this post.
Mandisa, Roxanna, Saladin, you know.
Yes.
Peace, bro.
Bye.
Yeah, Dave can always be depended on for an interesting take on things. And if you guys don't know, Dave is the reason that I actually started doing podcasts and videocasts, because a long time ago on Blog Talk Radio, he had a show called The Shock of the Hour. And it was enough to curl your toenails, because he would just go in on these subjects with just no regard for anybody's feelings. And I would always tell him, he's got to start that again. And I started doing my podcasts and shows, and I finally got him to start being on again. So he's probably going to break off and start doing his own, where they decide, I'm a little crazy. He is full balls deep crazy when he goes into his conspiracy theories. We'll have to ask him about that on the next one. There are a few other people that I wanted to bring in chat with us as well. But yeah, we got a little off on the immigration issue, because I'm dealing with that here in Brazil. Venezuela, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but Venezuela is just a flaming pile of poop right now. The government's fallen, and there are immigrants pushing across borders all over South America, especially Brazil, because Brazil is, arguably the best South American country. It has all modern conveniences, just a great place to be. I probably got a better internet connection than any of you. But one of the things that keeps happening is, how do we deal with this? Because when we talk about immigration, we're not just talking about, hey, there's a guy in another country who wants to go to your country. When you have countries like Brazil filling up with people who, A, don't speak the language, B, have no marketable skills. That's the other real issue. And C, the minority of people that do have marketable skills are in direct competition with men and women who have lived and paid taxes in the country their entire life. And all these things are things that we talk about when we deal with immigration, not just in the United States, but in a global issue. The second piece of evidence I will give is North Korea. The world has agreed to play this weird space opera where they say, we want North Koreans to be free. However, no one wants North Koreans to be free. Because when you look at South Korea and you look at Japan, if you were to have the borders flooded by millions of people with, again, no education, no help, they're very, very, very poor. They have no skills because the government makes sure they can't even farm, and they're all unhealthy. What happens? Because it's not a matter of, I want to be nice and let these people in. What happens when we do say, yeah, let's let that go into Venezuela or Korea or China? Are we dealing with those issues in America right now? And I don't know if as high up north as where we were, Saladin and Niagara Falls, New York, have the immigration, we'll start that way and work across. Have those things touched Niagara Falls, New York, way in the northern cold?
Well, Buffalo is a sanctuary city. So we've started to see a lot of immigrant populations coming in from various places: Sudan, Rwanda, Burma, a lot of these places. And there's not an influx of people to the degree where you would see a strain in terms of what you're talking about, because it's pretty well organized in terms of who's being let into the country in terms of that particular city. So we don't see like a flood of people coming in or anything like that. But for the most part, the immigrant populations that are coming into Buffalo, you're starting to also see the growth and the development of small micro economies in the areas where the immigrant populations are actually coming in. Now, one of the challenges is a lot of times you see people who have this approach towards people who come from other countries as like, they may love the food, it's exotic to them. They may love other different elements of their culture. But the challenge is, do you love the people who are creating those elements of the culture? So to
It's
me,
like
that's
people
one of
love
the
Mexican food, they just
challenge.
don't like Mexicans.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so it's so that's one of the keys in order to develop the type of relationships with people who are coming from other places, you know. So but in terms of like the Buffalo area, it's a beautiful thing that I'm starting to see with where a lot of the immigrant populations are moving into, because they're bringing something unique, and generally speaking, they're being welcomed into Buffalo as a sanctuary city. You have different people on the outskirts that may not like it because they're a little bit more conservative. But other than that, it's a beautiful thing that I've been seeing.
So it hasn't started to affect the immigrants yet. Because remember, whenever we talk about immigrants, the stunning and overwhelming majority are not going to affect the people with 1 or 2 university degrees. It's going to be our friend who cooks hamburgers, our friend who fixes cars, the lady who repairs whatever. Those are normally the first hit. Have you started to see any of that?
Not to the point where it's like you talking about the conversation about you taking our jobs type stuff.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. When they talk, well, because I always want to be specific. When people say you're taking our jobs, we have to realize it's always going to be the blue-collar, uneducated guy who just has a regular job that gets hit first and hardest by anyone who can compete. Because if all you have is a high school diploma, you know, you're fighting against other Americans who also have a high school diploma. You know, and that's is that a real issue, and has that happened?
One of the things that I've started to see is more of an entrepreneurial approach with immigrant populations. So even if they come into a sanctuary city like Buffalo, and they may start off with jobs in the service, and you typically see approach towards being an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? And even if people would have the opinion that someone's taking their job, a lot of times it's a very temporary thing anyway. So I don't see a lot of people, especially in some of the communities where you have the more immigrant settlements going on, of people being up in arms like, you know, you taking over our neighborhood, or you don't really see that kind of narrative. You have more of that type of xenophobic perspective from people who are actually on the outskirts that ironically come to these neighborhoods to eat some of the food of these immigrants. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Roxana, you were talking about how in Mexico there's an influx of Cubans and places like that. What is the problem people have with them immigrating to Mexico? Like, what is that difference? What is the thing that they're saying these immigrants are bringing negative?
Well, the main thing is Mexicans. You know, Mexico is a developing country. It's first world in some places, and it's third world in others. So the Mexicans feel as though their economy is not strong.
Uh-oh, did anybody else lose her?
Yeah, I lost her.
Yeah.
You know, it's hilarious that she said developing nation. We can come back to her. Mandisa, have you seen that in Atlanta?
Most of what we see. Oh, there she goes. Go ahead, Roxana. We lost you for a second.
Oh, the situation is such that especially when we had the caravan coming from from Central America through Guatemala through Mexico, when the caravan came in, there was talk of we're poor, we're having dire economic situation. The economy is not good for us local Mexicans. We cannot sustain people coming in. But Mexico did offer to give people legal status. Peña Nieto was the former president. He just recently left a couple of months ago, and he was willing to
Uh-oh. Okay, let's do this. Mandisa.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. Yusef, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would say that in Atlanta, of course, I think there's a lot of propaganda when it comes to the South, and there are when it came to people, and when there are a lot of people who brought into Trump's crap about the Mexicans coming in, and there was one politician who tried to campaign on rounding up immigrants and driving them back to the border or some crap, and he lost. It was a Republican, of course. So they were they were feeding into that ridiculous propaganda about the bad illegal immigrants. So there's a lot of that down here, and most of the immigrant population in and around Atlanta is Latino or Latinx. You do have some refugees from Africa. Job, there were some of them who were from Kenya, from Somalia. And so there is a thriving community up in the Clarkston area, which is northeast Atlanta. There's a lot of we'll consider the Muslim community, people of color, and from those areas, and they tend to do pretty well. There's a mixture of them, having their own businesses. Some have. One thing I've seen here in Atlanta is there's a mixture. There's a mixture of people who are have their own businesses or have their own establishments, but others are also working. They're working within in certain jobs and certain professions in their community, and some they do have doctors in their communities. And so I would say Atlanta is that blue dot in the red state. Most of Atlanta tends to be more liberal than the rest of the state of Georgia. And it was interesting, I'm not sure if you followed the governor's race here last year, where Stacey Abrams almost there was a runoff, because that was the first time in Georgia's history that there was such a close election. And so what it's saying is that, I guess to me, is that, even though Georgia is a primarily red state, there is, there's some progression going on there. There are some people who are, who are starting, there's a shift in some way.
For those of us who don't know, can you give us like a 60-second rundown on the Stacey Abrams debacle?
Yes. So Stacey Abrams was the Democratic candidate for governor here in the state of Georgia. Her opponent, Brian Kemp, who was now the former Secretary of State, then he was the Secretary of State, decided to enact a like this voter block, if you will. All of a sudden, because the Secretary of State is over the voting process here in Georgia. So all of a sudden they enacted these voting regulations or voting regularities, trying to make sure that everyone was properly registered to vote. The problem, though, was that something as simple as a name change could prevent you from voting. And they just so happened to enact that in this particular governor's race where Stacey Abrams was running. And so that, I think, prohibited a number of people, or held up the process for people who were voting. And so she called shenanigans on that. And so the election went into a runoff, because you could tell, like, this guy who was the Republican candidate for governor should not have been allowed to preside over that process, but he did anyway. So it was a big, it was a bit, and I know she eventually conceded the election.
Right. I posted the link.
Yeah.
But it was the way she did it. What a lot of people forget, well, to also say, to add on to what you said, is the way it happened is the people in Georgia, the people in the political situation in Georgia, they very specifically and illegally, it can go to court, engineered a situation where Stacey Abrams couldn't win because all of her votes were counted. But the terrifying thing that Stacey Abrams talked about in her concession speech, and a concession speech is supposed to be one where you say, I lost, but the other guy is good. She took her 12 minutes and she listed out all the illegal and unethical things that she did, but she capped it with this. She said, think about this. I got that close to winning despite all the things that they did. Even though they did all these other horrible things, I still almost won because I had enough votes, which means the overwhelming number of people in the state supported her. They had to trim down to get just enough.
They sure did.
And it was a terrifying.
And that says a lot, considering, like we said, Georgia is a red state outside of Atlanta. So for her to have come that close to winning the election says a lot. And like you said, they essentially had to cheat in order to keep her from winning.
Wow. You know, Chris just joined. If you want to say hi, tell him where you're from. And I wanted to go into the way that the immigration stuff might be popping in your area. But tell them who you are, Chris.
Hey, guys. I'm Chris.
Hi,
I'm
Chris.
from Scotland. Hey. Can you tell me all your names so that I know you?
I'm Mandisa.
Mandisa. YusefWateef, of course.
I'm Saladin.
Saladin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Roxana.
Nice to meet y'all.
Hello.
Hey.
So we were talking about the concept of this immigration issue, and we were talking about it about a Latin American perspective and a North American perspective, and even, you know, the way we look at Venezuela and Brazil. But coming from Europe, how are you dealing with, you know, the wave of, I believe, Eastern Europeans?
I think Eastern Europeans, Middle Eastern, African, there are a lot of immigrants going to Europe because there are a lot of things happening in the world. But I don't know if the numbers are you know, critical or anything like that. I haven't been in Europe for a long time. Well, 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, you say it like you've been gone for 40 years.
Yeah.
Scotland wasn't that long ago. But no, what I'm saying is that
things have changed a lot.
I watch a lot of the news from all over the world, and they make this European issue seem as if there is an intentional invasion of Muslims in Europe, and they're coming to, I don't know, pillage, take the village. I don't know what's going on, but apparently, are the numbers really that staggering?
I think it's all twisted. I mean, I'll give you one good example. The economy was fucked in 2008. It was a huge crash, as you all know. And about 3-4 years later, people were blaming Polish people for that. We don't have jobs because Polish people are here. No, it's because the banks crashed the economy that you don't have jobs. And, you know, people forget very easily, or they don't investigate the causes of things. It's very easy for the media to say Muslims do this and that, and they just relate it to the stuff in the Middle East, and people get scared and they react. But I think it's total bullshit. I think if you look at statistics, you know, immigrants commit some crimes, but and maybe they're higher than the average national rates, but they're not that much higher that you have to be terrified.
Because I always wondered how Europe deals with things because they're all so close. The European nations aren't like the United States, Mexico, Canada, even South America. You have a little bit more room to breathe. Because when we see people coming in, one of the questions that, and Roxana shared earlier, her situation where immigration guy walked up to her and said, what language? No, what was it that he said, Roxana?
He asked me for my status, my identification, my visa, my passport.
This was an average guy or a policeman?
He was an immigration officer for the Mexican government. When I travel on the bus and on the internally on a plane, in the plane.
And so what we were talking about was that whole concept where now you're in a situation where everybody has to look around and say, okay, how are we going to deal with all these people coming in? But the thing that I wanted to get to that we didn't get to while Dave was here was the who. Because we often talk about immigrants, and I even threw the word Muslim in there. We're talking about ethnicities. Do we find that certain ethnicities, you know, are we defining ethnicity as where you're from, like you're an American, so you get to come in? Or are they looking at it as brown people? And when you deal with Muslims, like most Americans don't even know that Muslims can come in any different shape, color, or form. Their idea is just, I don't know, whatever they saw in the last movie.
Good question, huh? Someone want to answer it?
Oh wow! Everybody just dropped the mics on that last one before we. Oh, I think Mandisa and Saladin had to step away for a minute.
I'm still here. I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. Because you look like you went south. I didn't know if you had anything on that.
No, it's just interesting to hear how these things really do affect, how they are impactful worldwide.
Wow. It's the same issue. And for me, it always goes to the class issue. Race is always going to trump class for people of that race on a global scale. However, you also see it's a class issue. It's where did you come from? How much money does that country have? And
I think if you look at the United States, people have the impression it has been flooded with, unskilled immigrants, but that's never been the case. It's very, very hard, unless you do it illegally, which is also hard. It's very hard to immigrate to the US. You need to be educated. You need to have a certain income. So this idea that the US is just letting anyone in is bullshit.
Well, we do have a secret weapon, and I think you guys can help me if you remember, the HE1 something visa, which allows companies to hire someone from a different country if that person has like an unusually high skill set. Because what most people don't know is that like 80% of Silicon Valley came here from another country. When they're looking for people that have, a double PhD in theoretical physics and IT, they're not getting nearly as many people as they need from the United States. The people who are the integral parts of those companies are all coming from other countries, especially China, which is churning out countless people every year with quality education. I lived in China for 2 years, and they're serious people. They're serious people. I mean, if anybody blinks for a minute, I worry about China more than I ever worry about Russia because China has patience.
Yeah, me too.
That's why I want my daughter to learn Mandarin. Speaking of China, did you guys read that article about the Chinese birther organization? I don't know what the name is, but Chinese, and that's not unique to China. Everybody does that, right? Everybody does that, but I guess the Chinese are more organized. They're larger in numbers. So
how does it work?
My problem with that is that I know of individuals who come from other countries to come to the United States.
She's gone.
Uh-oh. You froze right in the middle of what sounded like it was going to be pretty juicy and interesting.
I didn't know United States to have children. Can you hear me?
Okay, start.
Yeah, you got to bring it back.
Tell us what the movement is before you give us your thoughts on it, because I don't know what we're talking about.
Oh, well, individuals from all over the world come to the United States because you have birthright citizenship. It's a very common thing. But China this is the first case that we have where the United States have arrested individuals.
Dang.
Disappeared.
China did have an awesome internet, by the way. If anybody ever goes to China, it might be restricted if you don't have a VPN. But China had some damn good internet. I don't ever remember going in or out.
I'm starting to doubt the Mexican internet, though.
Well, you know what? What if it's Mexican intelligence? Mexican and Chinese intelligence just don't want her to get this story out. So as soon as she starts to say it, they just drop her internet. And if she starts,
are you sounding like David now? You said
no, not conspiracy brother, not conspiracy brother. Does anybody else know what she's talking about?
Yeah.
Can you fill us in while waiting?
Well, basically, they arrested a group of people who were running this birther racket where they actually had hotels and everything set up for people to come to the country and to give birth on this soil because they automatically get citizenship. So like she was mentioning, people have been doing it all the time, but to actually take it to that level of organization is something that the first time people have been arrested for doing. You know what I mean? So.
But is it illegal?
Well, here's the thing. What they did is, it's not illegal to have a baby in the United States, but here's the problem.
And they're paying people.
Yeah, lots of people come to America to have a child because of birthright citizenship, and that's a whole different issue. We can talk about that amendment. I believe it was the 14th Amendment. Is that the 14th Amendment? I don't know. Anybody else here? Okay, I guess I'm just a Constitution nerd. But that birthright citizenship, you know, it was something that got out of hand very quickly because a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, do other countries do it? And the answer is a lot of countries do it, but most countries stop. And as we look at, I look at, let's take the most egregious, one of the two most egregious things our country did, which was murdering Native Americans and enslaving blacks. But at some point, they realized that the laws that made that okay were wrong, and they changed it. Because here, and I believe it's the 14th Amendment, let me double check. It said that if you were born in the United States, you got to stay here. What most people don't ever dig into is that that law was made right after slavery so that the federal government could ensure that blacks were not put on boats and shipped back to Africa, having already extracted the labor from them. That law was very specifically intended to protect descendants of slaves and former slaves, one generation removed, from being kicked out of the country because they were told they were not American. It was never about people from other countries. But most people don't dig that far into it. Did anybody else know that? Did anybody else know that that's why that law was enacted?
Yes, I know that.
So you get to this issue where say, well, should anybody be able to come and have a child in America? Well, now is when it gets dicey. Because if you're coming to America and you say, hey, I've got this job or this thing I'm doing and I happen to meet a girl and have a baby here, that's one thing. But coming here just to have the baby, like, by the way, when they said the Chinese were doing that, it didn't surprise me. They're very organized people. It does not surprise me even the slightest bit that they had this entire system worked out. And they've probably been doing it for decades. Come here, have a baby. They probably have profiles written up for these people, exactly what to say to them, and it gives them a tie-in. The trick is this. Once you do that, it's not as if they're having a baby in a country they plan on living in and supporting. They're having a child in a country they're never planning on doing anything other than extracting resources from. That's where it gets tricky. They're not planning on staying here building
it's like
and becoming part of the community. They're doing it so that they can say afterwards, okay, now that we've got this, what can I pull out of that country? And that's where it gets ugly.
Is that true, though? Are they not just looking for the visa and to change country?
Wait, say that again, Chris. I couldn't quite hear you.
Are they not just looking to emigrate?
Well, no, they ain't trying to assimilate.
No.
You know?
The Chinese people who are doing this have enough money, they don't want to leave China. They just want the ability to be able to go back and forth from America. But what were you saying, Saladin, about immigration and assimilation and immigration?
I said that's not their intention. They're not striving to come here to assimilate into American society. Nah.
So they don't respect the culture.
Can I say something?
They respect it enough not to assimilate.
Good answer.
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm wanting my permanent residency in Mexico. I want the same thing for my daughter. I'd like to catch a residency in Europe. I want to get a second passport for the Gambia and West Africa. So, I'm doing the same things as other immigrants, in the United States. I want to pick up residencies and passports. And there are many people like me who are doing the same thing.
But just because a lot of people
who are citizens of multiple countries or who have legal status in different countries.
Well, just because it's legal and everybody else does it doesn't make it right. I do believe it is unethical to go to a country that you have no intention of being a productive member of just to extract resources from.
If you think about it, though, it's kind of like
you're a virus.
It's damaging to the U.S. economy, perhaps. Maybe that's the intention.
Yeah, look at in Africa with the male-female ratios in China. You got a lot of Chinese men now that are going to Africa just to get black women in Africa. That's a thing too.
Well, that's a different issue.
That is a thing.
It's the same, but it's a different issue. Having lived in China, you're right. Because in China, they would only allow one child, and most people would abort a girl child if they had it. So now you have a disproportionately high number of men who will never have the prospect of having a wife. But when they go to Africa, they are more than happy to live there. They're more than happy to take their businesses there. They're more than happy to stay there as workers. But they're not parading it. Like I said, I was in China. I actually did an article about the Kung Fu kids of China. But it's one of those situations where it's not as if they're going there with the specific intention of, I'm not going to be anything, I'm not going to contribute anything to this culture, but I'm just going to take everything out and quote unquote use it. That's the part that
they're doing the same thing in Africa. because in Africa you have more wealth of natural resources. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. I think they're looking at total domination.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
As are all our countries, and that's the
but they have a chance of doing it. That's the difference.
We're doing it now. America's doing it right now and has been for a while.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I don't actually like it that much because it's a lot of the crises we have right now are because of that. Why are you fighting wars in the Middle East? There's no decent reason to do that other than oil.
Well, listen, we've all got stuff to do, and I respect everybody's timetable. I'm really glad we did this, and I want to say two things. Share the post with your friends, but I'm going to give everybody a chance to make up any closing statements, and I thought that Chris would get here earlier, and I'm sorry you weren't able to. But the other thing I want to say is I want everybody to send me a message with somebody else that I should invite to this, someone who you know is interesting and a person that likes to engage in good conversation. Not to say you guys aren't coming back, because last week we had like 8 or 9 people that dropped in and out, but I was on for 4 hours. I just can't do that today. And I plan on doing this every 2 or 3 weeks. So let's start with Saladin.
Oh, just thank you. I'm glad I had an opportunity to connect with all of y'all. Those of you who I've never met before, and to just get some perspectives, some real-time terrain perspectives, because a lot of time you may hear things about different places and it's kind of like the map is not the terrain, you know, and I just appreciate getting some perspectives of what the terrain looks like where y'all is at, and I look forward to adding on with y'all again in the future.
Awesome. Roxana.
I appreciate you. Thank you for the stimulating conversation, and it's important for me to still talk to my people in the States, to know what's going on the ground in the States. I'm a mom. More than likely, my daughter's going to leave me and go off to college, probably back in the United States. So I need to know what's going on there, and I always like connecting with people in Europe. So you're appreciated. Thank you.
Mandy.
Yeah.
I tried to say Mandy and Mandy at the same time, but my face doesn't work that way.
Well, yeah, this was a great conversation, Yusef. I appreciated meeting everyone, talking to David again, meeting Saladin and Roxana and Christopher. Sorry, Saladin, I'm going to say you look like Omari, i.e. Ghost from Power. I have to throw that in there.
That's funny.
Which isn't a bad thing, but yeah. But yes.
I'm taller than him, though.
Oh, okay, cool. But yeah, as I have 3 children, and my daughter, who actually just graduated from college, and she actually graduated a year early. She did 3 study abroad. She did 3 study abroad courses in Europe, and she wants to live outside of the United States. She wants to live abroad. So this conversation was very, very interesting. And also, it's helping me to prepare for the fact that I may have a child who is living abroad, and what she may have to deal with when it comes to her trying to obtain permanent residency, as well as perhaps dual citizenship. So this is very, very, it's very, very relevant to what's going on in my life right now. And I look forward to, I was just in the Bay Area back in November of last year. I spoke at Berkeley. So hopefully I'll have the opportunity to come out there again or visit wherever you guys are, and hopefully connect with you in person, because I do like connecting with people in person. So thank you all. Thank you once again.
Let me say this, Mandisa. First, of course, anything that I can do to help, not just you and the fam, but particularly your daughter. I've lived in 15 countries successfully and run businesses abroad. If I can do anything to help her, you and I can just have a regular phone call chat about it. If she's in Europe, I would actually say, let me say it, if you don't want to, don't just stick to Europe. Send her to South America for a while. Hell, I've got friends in Japan. Send her there for a while. If she just graduated school, she's got this ripe opportunity to see a few other things. You want her to have more. She should want to have more than one abroad experience. And if you were to send her to Brazil, of course, I'd never let anything happen to her. Yeah. and she would get to see what life is like down here, or
good. Yeah.
I want the doors open. I've done it for my other friends with kids, and I would be glad to do it for her.
Awesome. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm actually living in the same city as YusefWateef. I'm living in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So I myself an immigrant expat, and it just clicked with me that all these issues we could be talking about ourselves as well, as you mentioned your daughter and stuff. And I think it's a big issue for, like, I've been here for, I don't know, 45 minutes. It's a big issue to tackle in that time, even in 2 hours. So it's something to talk about again, I think, from another perspective, maybe from us expat or expat experience or whatever.
Right on. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, bro.
Bye-bye.
Peace,
Bye-bye.